Just drop it in the microwave there. You got a microwave?
We on,
Huh?
we on. Good evening and welcome to an exclusive interview with Vice President Dr. BHARRAT JAGDEO. We are going to be discussing current affairs affecting Guyanese, and a lot of people have been calling me and asking how, since there's so much instability in certain parts of the political environment, how do they feel secure? And I have asked for this interview specifically to bring clarity to Guyanese, all Guyanese, in understanding how this administration will be treating all Guyanese. Dr. Jagdeo, thank you for this interview and taking time out from your busy schedule to do this and bring transparency to Guyanese. Going right into it, there is quite a bit of what has to be labeled as hullabaloo about the We Care program that's being rolled out. The Ministry of Education is rolling out a plan where they're giving parents $19,000 per child. Opposition members have come out with no proper argument to show why Guyanese should not be afforded the opportunity of this support. But yet they have come out and tried to convince their supporters that it does not make sense. In this time of hardships in Guyana, many people call me Dr. Jagdeo, they ask for even people want to borrow $5,000. $19,000 could take some families a far way. Can you give us an understanding of how this administration is rolling out? I'm supposing people would want to know in terms of transparency with this program, since it is billions of Guyana dollars, and the assurance to most Guyanese or all Guyanese that everyone who is entitled will be receiving this, and that this administration will be looking over Guyanese of all walks of life, to suggest race, religion, or political affiliation. Can you give your government's role?
Well, thank you very much. I too was shocked that many senior leaders of APNU were actively trying to dissuade people from collecting this grant. But I guess, as we have come to know now, that no behavior by APNU and its members, its senior leadership, could be considered shocking, because they've descended into anti-national rhetoric on more than one occasion. They use constantly racism to try to divide our people, and now even when this initiative can benefit every Guyanese, particularly their supporters, they are now trying to get them not to benefit from it. We saw the same behavior with the GOAL program, the scholarship program, where people who were beneficiaries of scholarships under the previous government, ministers who got tens of millions of dollars of scholarships for themselves and their families, trying to dissuade Afro-Guyanese from applying for scholarships. We'll deal with that in a moment. And then, of course, the entire issue of the vaccine. The selfish behavior when Harman and the others had taken the vaccine, the Russian vaccine, Sputnik, both doses, then they tried to dissuade others by questioning the authenticity of the vaccine and then its efficacy. So this behavior is typical APNU behavior. But the only way they can succeed is if we in Guyana, we suffer collectively from amnesia or short-term memory. Because if every Guyanese were to look at the history of this grant, then they will see the duplicity of the APNU regime and its leaders. So this grant existed under the previous PPP government. The school kids, 167,000 of them, received $10,000 each at $1.67 billion it cost the Treasury. APNU came into office in 2015, and I recall Truckman saying that the program is untenable, uneconomic. Imagine a grant to our school children of every race, every political persuasion, every religion, is uneconomic, and the only way it should proceed in the future if people were means tested. The Minister of Finance at that time and Granger administration defended it. They all defended the removal of the 10,000 grant. They said it could not be afforded. It was unaffordable by the Treasury. $1.67 billion. Now, I have pointed out in opposition and now that food in government, dietary in government, in the period that APNU was in office, grew by over $1.67 billion. That is food in government, for government officials. Yet, they could not afford the grant for the school kids. They complained it was unaffordable. So they spent, for example, $600 million per year in buying luxury vehicles and all of that. But we couldn't find the money to give the grant for the school kids because it was unaffordable. The Treasury was broke. When we look at rentals of building for government purposes, it went up by $1.4 billion. They had a racket to rent buildings. They rented from friends, family, at inflated prices. Some, even now we are trying to get out of some of those leases that we have on long-term contracts. So this was not a priority. The children's grant was not a priority for APNU. The luxury life, getting their own salary increased by 50%, getting a special medical program for themselves that the state paid for, was more important than finding money for the school kids. So we made a promise in our manifesto when we contested elections. We said we will return the grant and we will increase it to $50,000 per child over the 5 years in office. And the first, we've restored it and increased it to $15,000 because it was not there. That is the first tranche on the way to $50,000 per child. The PPP civic government is committed to ensuring that before the 5 years are completed, that the grant, every child would receive annually, fifth school child, $50,000. We're committed to that. This is the first tranche of it, the $15,000. We then took the school uniform voucher, it was $2,000, and we doubled that to $4,000. That is in this budget. And that is why people are receiving $19,000 now, every school child. The $15,000 from the Because We Care grant and $4,000 from the school uniform project. This will help 172,000 school kids in the public sector. Those who are in public schools. It will cost the Treasury $3.2 billion. we can afford it. If we can afford to spend money for all sorts of things, we can afford this money to give back to our children. And that is the PPP's priority, the children of Guyana. Not APNU children or PPP children or Afro or Indo or Amerindian, the children of Guyana. We're happy to do this because it's assisting their families, etc. So this is very, very important, and we are doing this without touching the oil money. We have not touched a single cent from the oil money in the Sovereign Wealth Fund. We have about $350 million that have been accumulated there. We haven't touched a cent as yet. We're doing this, and this is because we treat it as a priority. Now, you asked me about the control. The Ministry of Education assured us there is a robust system where the registers have to be submitted by the schools to the education department. It's vetted there, the envelopes are then prepared, and then it's given out. So the issue, so they seem to have a robust system, but it's being audited too. The Auditor General is involved. The Minister of Education spoke with me just this afternoon. She assured that the Auditor General is involved in the entire process to see that all the kids get their money. So I know that a number of people have contacted us from the private schools, and parents are also saying that, well, they want their children to receive the money too. So there's been a debate. In the first, when we introduced it, it was not introduced for the private school kids, it was the public schools. So we've asked the Minister of Education to look at how many kids are in the private sector, going to school in the private sector. The ministry does not have all of the numbers. They're trying to verify the numbers. And then to see if, should we extend it to the private sector, or kids going to private schools, how we're going to ensure that the intended beneficiaries receive the money without any leakage or corruption. But we are actively examining now the possibility of extending the help or the grant to kids going to private schools. Maybe not all of them would take it, but the parents, some parents have been making the solid case that they struggle at home to send their kids to go to private school. It's not as though they are rich. And in a way, those kids who go to private schools, they take some pressure off the public schools too, in terms of space. So the government will consider all the facts on this issue, and will make a determination very, very soon on the matter. So I was shocked that the Coretta MacDonald from an APNU member of parliament and a leader of the teachers union, you know, trying to get the teachers not to cooperate with us, the government, in extending this grant. It's shocking. As an educator, she has failed miserably. She has allowed her jaundice APNU politics to influence her, and she's trying to use the union to sabotage an initiative that would help the children of this country. It is unbelievable that a person of that nature, who'd been in the teachers union for so long, would allow this negative, racist, barren APNU politics to influence her. I've seen that she has set her own standards for the opening of school in September. You know, I wish Coretta MacDonald came to my office when I was leader of the opposition and told me that she couldn't secure a meeting with the ministers or the government at that time. You recall the trouble they had when the government would not even honor things that we had given in the 5 years agreement that they had prior to with the PPP government prior to APNU assuming office. Used to complain bitterly about them not respecting the teachers union, not even giving the duty-free concessions, etc. The moment she became involved in in APNU's politics, she morphed into this person who places politics above country and people, and it's an ugly morphing. It doesn't do the country well. So I would urge parents, and the parents have been ignoring her call for them and the call of the APNU not to take the grant because they recognize it's important for their children. But this is not just about, so we need to remember one thing, and for all of those out there, the children were getting 10,000 under the PPP. APNU took it away, saying they couldn't afford it. Now we've given it back, 15,000 for that because we care grant, and it's going to go to 50,000 per child because there's a difference between PPP and APNU. It's a huge difference. The same thing they did with their pensioners. They took away their water, free water, and that would cost about $700-800 million. And pensioners had to pay about $800 million more on the APNU for water. The first budget we passed in September, we got into office in August. In September of last year, we restored free water for pensioners. We restored it. So there is a huge difference between the two. And it didn't say pensioners who support the PPP are going to get free water, the pensioners of Guyana. So I would say to people, just ignore them. This is typical APNU negative politics. I saw recently, you know, they're complaining about Linden when you know the ministers went up there and distributed 400 house lots. And they were there in office. In the 5 years, they distributed less house lots in Linden than the PPP did in this one occasion. But it's typical, and if you hear them talk about Linden, they absolutely love Linden and Lindeners. But they'd have no track record of any achievement in Linden because the two major new housing schemes that were developed in Linden, Amelia's Ward and Block 22, were done under the PPP with thousands of new houses there if you go there. And anything of note now in Linden, if you go to the new hospital or the water treatment plant or any of those facilities, you would see they were built under the PPP. For 5 years, they did very little. In fact, absolutely nothing for the people of Linden, excepting to give a lot of their members the land, the prime land along the banks of the river, and Lowenfield was a beneficiary of that too. He got 200 acres there in Linden, when many ordinary people couldn't get it. The Figueroa brothers got prime lands. It's almost like everyone in APNU. And we are having, by the way, we are having a hard time getting back some of those things. The court just ruled against us that we can't terminate the leases like that were given, say, at Enmore. You know, they closed the estates and then they took all the estate properties and leased it to the bigwig in APNU and their supporters, some of their top friends and family. So the sugar workers' assets were given to the APNU leadership at Peppercorn. Their leases didn't go through the legal department of NISL. We don't know how they were done. So the court now said, oh, there is no breach of the lease. But the whole issue is they corruptly gave out these leases that they talk a lot about sugar workers and etc. They took the assets of the sugar industry and then gave it to the friends and family. And now we are having a hard time getting it back. Whilst we're on this, I just want to say to the sugar workers who were laid off, the 7,000 of them, that we remember our pre-election promise too. And soon I'll be meeting with them. There is a special initiative that we're working on for the 7,000 workers who were laid off. And soon I'll be meeting with them to explain more about this initiative. I know some people have other jobs and some are getting back jobs in the sugar industry. But there is a special initiative that we made it clear we campaign on. We're public. And a lot of these things we didn't hide. We put them in our manifesto. We campaign on them. So we intend to fulfill our promises.
For the 7,000 sugar workers
who were laid off, yes, and we're working on an initiative currently. I want to assure people also that those who were affected by the flood, the numbers are in now. You have about 30,000 households and small farmers who lost like kitchen garden, and then a number of the bigger farmers like those who lost rice, mature rice, seedling rice, livestock, etc. So we have this database now, and we are now working out how much and what grants we will give to families and those who suffered losses. The president shall make an announcement shortly. So we are in the middle of that, so that they will get some help in making sure that they can return to productive life, or their households, they got some stuff damaged and stuff. At least it might not be a large sum, but they will get some help from the government, and that will come shortly too. And that runs into billions of dollars again. You would recall that we went to the Parliament for a supplementary of $10 billion to assist with rebuilding infrastructure as well as assisting people. So there are lots of initiatives that are being worked on. Another promise we made was to the pensioners that we will double the old age pension in 5 years. In the first year, we increased it by 25%. Right? So we increased it by 25%, and we intend to keep that promise too. Increasing it by 25%, the pension, just 25%, puts over $4 billion more in the pockets of the pensioner per year. Just a 25% increase. And so this is crucial. What I'm spending time talking to you about these things because we made a lot of social sector pledges apart from the economic one that we'll work on. And we want to assure people that day after day we have kept these pledges in our minds. When we go to work, we're working to implement them, the promises we made to people. We did have some setbacks. We didn't expect a COVID type environment, but we're trying to address that, which has been costly on the economy, costly on people's lives and their health, and it has created some problems because we can't get the economy to operate at full steam and to get the job creating initiatives going. But we're going to come out of that. And but I want people to know we're working on the social sector pledges. That's why we removed the VAT on water, on electricity, on data, on food stuff as soon as we got back in office. Or else the cost of living would have even been higher. I know a lot of people are very concerned about this, but none of the items that, like food items, that people use frequently have any VAT on them. Because so we can't remove taxes for that to get the cost down, just that the prices have gone up globally. But we anticipate that once you get past COVID, global production will go up back, and a lot of the prices will come down for building materials and everything else. But I just wanted to talk a bit about that to assure people on the social sector side that we are busy trying to implement all that we promise.
Dr. JAGDEO, quite a bit you've said about what is being given to the people. This administration, over a short period of time, has given back the Guyanese in hand, literally cash in hand, billions of dollars. Much of it that was taken from them, like the 10,000 cash grant for the kids per year. This administration also is dealing and financing the effects of an opposition that creates problems. Let's look at the Henry Boys situation that was created by the opposition leader and Mr. Joseph Harmon, just because of what they said at the Henry Boys home, the family home, mass confusion, attacks on people and property, damage to property, rioting, fires in the streets, has caused a lot of damages to citizens of Region 6, Region 5, and to the country in general. This government has said they will be refunding people for some of the damages and so on. How is this administration going to be ensuring that we could be consistent in what we're doing in terms of financing these operations, and the Guyanese citizens are not affected in the long run? Because this is a bill. These bills are adding up.
Yeah, sure. So a lot of other things. You're right that since we got into office, I just dealt with some of these initiatives. But if you look at the grant to develop the village economy in Amerindian areas, each of them got a grant, about $1.7 billion worth of grant. We just bought some tractors and trailers to each village in the hinterland. And also, not just on the coastal area, but in the hinterland areas, we're working aggressively in ensuring that people have the tools to produce, to create jobs, for food security, etc. Now, I frankly do not believe that you can change the nature of what I call the lunatic fringe that has now occupied the seat of the opposition. That in their midst you have people who can see nothing but race, and they have, I think, collectively agreed that racism is their most potent tool. They must try to divide the country with the hope of making less effective the initiatives of the PPP government. So when they complain, so Harmon went out first of all in the afternoon to say that, oh, we're going to be selective in giving out the household grant that we gave, the COVID-related grant. They couldn't get much traction, although he knew that we were going to go to every home, in every village, Indian villages, Black villages, Amerindian villages. We're going to go to every home. Yet they persisted with that, oh, people are going to be discriminated against. Because they tried to create an unease among it. Oh, somehow, although you're getting the money, don't believe this government is giving it willingly. It's because we're fighting for it for you. When they had nothing, absolutely nothing to do with it. These are our initiatives or promises to the people. So they're trying to say, oh, we wanted to do that. So now they're saying, some of them are saying, we wanted to give back the cash grant. They wanted to give back the cash grant, but they never gave it for the school kids. But now they wanted to do. So the same thing they do almost in every initiative. So the Linden, oh, we were going to give out the 400 house lots. Never mind, in 5 years they give 360 house lots. And the school kids, so this is their tool. And they want to create a sense of unease among the Afro-Guyanese population that nothing this government will do, nothing for you. So coming back to the gold program, 5,000 scholarships we said this year, most likely it will go to 6,000 scholarships. And a significant percentage, when the numbers come out, you will see, will be Afro-Guyanese because they qualify for the scholarship. So they were trying to dissuade people to say, oh, the government will never give you. That's where they sit now. Racist narrative has dominated them. If you look at every program they have, it's only about racism. And we need to return to this. We have to show this is the only racist party. Every time we speak, we talk about this because we cannot, for one moment, more and more people have to be saying this, branding the party that is the real racist party in Guyana, so that everybody would know what to expect. And so for too long we've been quiet about it. So they get away with it by shouting wolf, the wolf. They're getting away with really murder. So that you don't really examine them carefully. But any examination of their policies would see they're the biggest racists. If you look at a Burke, a Rickford Burke, or a Sherrod Duncan, or a Benchcott, that's all they do. They're first of all attention seekers. Attention seekers, and then so they fabricate stuff like the way that Rickford Burke gets recognized. He's become a leader is by saying Nandalal wanted to kill him. Why would Nandalal want to kill or have a plot against Burke? Burke is a non-entity. Burke is a man who ran away from the country under questionable circumstances. In New York, he's known as a lowlife. The guy doesn't have any, I don't think he even has a job, a regular day job. I heard that the only thing this Caribbean Center for Democracy or something like that does, it collects donations from people. And he lives off of these things. He and others live off of it. Why will a very successful man who is the Attorney General of Guyana even bother with him? The work has nuisance value for us. The fact that, he knows a few congressmen because they're from Brooklyn means absolutely nothing. The United States of America knows when the threat to democracy came and from whom it came, because they have institutional memory. They're not stupid people. They're not going to listen to Rickford Burke, and they make policies on that basis. So but he has now emerged as a leader. Now a French non-entity emerges a madcap, basically, who seeks attention. This is one of their leaders now. Imagine, look at it. Sherrod Duncan has become a leader of APNU. Where are the cerebral young people that they had? I've seen a lot of them leaving APNU, actually. Leaving APNU. The cerebral ones, the ones who you can entrust more with policy making. And that is the crisis within APNU. It's a crisis not just of leadership, but of direction. And they can just hang on to racism. So this is all I expect. The Henry incident was just a manifestation of the deep-seated racism of APNU and the push to create racial disharmony in our country. And so too will everything else. Everything else. They can't criticize us on the basis or have a technical debate, because they would never engage in that. But they will all day long wallow in this cesspool of racism. That's all.
The second point I touched on, Dr. Jagdeo, and you haven't covered, is the sustainability
Okay.
of
Well,
these
the
initiatives.
thing is that we plan long term. We're not a government. We've had a long history of this. We took a bankrupt country where 153% of revenue was going to service debts, where inflation rate was close to 100%, where interest rates, if you were borrowing in a commercial bank, was close to 40%. The balance of payment was the deficit was nearly 47% of GDP, half. Every 2 years, we're doubling our debt with the rest of the world. The fiscal deficit massive. And by the end of our tenure, an economy that was 300 million US dollars. By the end of our tenure, it was nearly a 4 billion US dollars economy. Inflation was single digit. Interest rates had come down to single digit. We had built up reserves there. We had the debt servicing was not 153% of revenue, 5% of revenue. That is our tenure in government. That's our track record, because we planned. We grew the economy because of initiatives opening up, because of policy making, and we have our plans to do that again. So they had been negative too in the past, and we grew the economy in spite of APNU. Remember the history of more fire, slow fire, burning, stuff like that, supporting criminal elements even to throw the country in turmoil. We've had to live through that, and we will live through these attempts by APNU, AFC to be disruptive. And so we are planning for the future. We can sustain these initiatives. None of the initiatives that we have implemented has been done in a haphazard manner. They've been costed. When we promised them in opposition, we did the numbers in opposition. We did the numbers. We know we could have afforded them. When we promised free university education at the outer years of the 5-year term, we said we couldn't do it immediately, but the outer years, we knew what we were talking about, because we expect the revenue to behave in a certain way. So right now, it's not just the planning process for the social sector, but we're putting in place a lot of the infrastructure, the building blocks for a rapidly growing economy. And we're not just focusing on oil and gas. So what if you talk to people in this country, you ask a private sector person, what's the biggest constraint to economic growth? And even in a family, what's one of your biggest worries? And they would say the cost of electricity. So we have, since we've been in office, we have now been moving on 30 megawatts of solar power. Before the end of the year, we're hoping to get those contracts in place, funded from money that we left when we earned from Norway. We're now moving on 250 megawatts for the gas stove energy project, and we're working now, and that would move before the end of this year to at least start, because we've already started doing the groundwork, the studies, the design, etc. And 116 megawatts for the hydro. This is leaving out small hydros and solar for Partika, Madhya, the many other, Wakanam, Leg 1, etc. All of these are going to have smaller solar units or mini hydros, etc. I'm excluding all of those. That's about nearly 500,000 megawatts of new power generating facility. New power generating. That would It will be double the national capacity of that we have now. That includes what GPL has, that they use to supply power to people, and what the private sector is using through self-generation. It will double that capacity. It would allow us to bring prices down to half of what we sell power at now, from 30 cents US cents per kilowatt hour to 15 US cents. That will make a difference. We're working day and night to get those things done. That is a building block. The next building block is telecom reform and getting internet to the deepest parts of our country, the rural areas, and then looking at e-governance, a platform that is e-health, e-education, and a safe city program, security initiatives. So a lot of work to keep the economy going. We're opening up new sectors. We're now working on the bridge across the Damar River. We're hoping by the end of the year that will be in place. We're working on the 4 highways to cover, or 3 highways to cover the most populous part of the country, from Mahaika all the way to Parika and to the airport. This is the densely populated areas with 4-lane roads. These are the building blocks for the economy to grow, so that we can keep sustaining the social sector spending. That is more to spend more on education, spend more on health care for our people, on the children's grant, on funding the money for the pensioners, etc. So we're putting together the building blocks in many of these areas that will keep the economy going. So a lot of quiet work is being done in many areas on planning, on moving projects forward, because as I was saying a couple days ago, we met the private sector, and I was saying one of the biggest unseen tragedies of APNU's years in office is what they have done to the economic landscape of the country. That when governments work, you work on a basis of a project cycle. So you identify new projects, you study them, you then seek the financing, and they get into the public sector investment program. And then you go through implementation. The projects we had put into the cycle, they implemented. The Sheriff Street Road, the West Coast Road, East Coast Road, all of these were, the airport, all of these were PPP projects. We put those in the cycle. They were in at the beginning of the cycle. They were implemented. They never added new ones. So now you have a drought in between. You have a gap in between. And that's what we're trying to replenish the project cycle from the beginning. So that after these projects are put in place, you'll have steady implementation that will be good for the economy too, because it means public sector spending also helps with job creation. Look at what the housing program is doing. It's generating thousands of new jobs, the government housing program. And all of these will generate new jobs, and then they will also give a boost, create economic opportunities to the private sector, procurement opportunities, etc. And then of course they will form the basis for people who are planning to come to Guyana, because they know in 4 years' time or so, electricity price will be half of what it is. So I can set up a manufacturing facility in Guyana, because now I can't manufacture, the price of electricity is too high. That sort of thing. So coming back to your point, we can sustain them in spite of the negative politics of APNU. We cannot allow their politics to stop us from doing what we were elected to do.
Dr. JAGDEO, I have asked yourself and a number of ministers this question constantly, and it is because I myself am asked the questions by APNU supporters. Because of the information disseminated in the bottom house gaffes to create disarray among their supporters, which most of the times have a negative effect on their supporters, not the country in general. People want to be reassured that all Guyanese are taken care of. One of the questions asked sorry about that.
Someone trying to get you?
Wrongful. Yes, one of the questions constantly asked is citizens are looking on at the opposition presently, the PNC, in a free fall. Their actions against development, their actions within the party itself. And people are asking if this administration, since the PPP are made up of Guyanese who are only human, the government also, if they would get frustrated at some time.
Yeah. It is frustrating to have to listen to people who use the 5 years to steal, and a lot of them are now before the courts and being investigated, who've used the 5 years to take away things that Guyanese had, like I just mentioned, the social sector initiatives, who've used the 5 years to basically just divide our people, not be a productive influence on Guyana, that they now come and give lectures. Who've done nothing, lectures on probity, how clean they are, and about their vision for Guyana. They have nothing. I see Patterson now talking about what should be done on oil and gas and stuff like that. This guy had, since 2016, he had a decision to make on where to land the pipeline, which would have today resulted in us, if they had built the pipeline and the gas plant, today resulted in us having cheap power. Didn't do it because they wanted to decide where the pipeline would go on private lands and stuff like that. This is the same people who killed the Amila Fall project but didn't have an alternative, yet committed us to 100% renewable by 2025 in the Paris Agreement. It's the stupidest thing. The president goes and says, I'm going to do 100% renewable by 2025, and zero initiative to achieve that. Zero initiative to do that. Now today they're giving us lectures on how to do these things well. So that is a bit frustrating sometimes, and you feel like going out on the road and just shouting loud, you know, and stuff like that. But it's just like, but then you come to the realization that this is what they're about. They're not about country, and they're not about people or anything else. They're just about getting back into political power. So they will use the tools that are available to them, and the only tools available to them now is racism. So although you become frustrated, and I hope that people in these bottom houses, that they will also question them when they come and say, what did you do? Why didn't we see you in 5 years? You know, why are you telling us this now? You know, what were you doing when you were there? So that those people will, over time, learn that this is a very selfish group of people that call themselves the opposition. And yeah, imagine a Coretta McDonald trying to get the parents not to get a grant for their kids, and make it look like if they take the grant, they're betraying their party.
Dr. JAGDEO, I want to thank you for that clarity, and there's always an amount of transparency. People, I can bring that to you, are very satisfied with the transparent methods of this government. And you know, some people have been saying, we ain't saying it like you take buyout. It's just that I'm metamorphosizing into other things too, and,
Yes.
and I am looking on. I must tell you, I'm looking on,
Okay.
and I'm hoping to, if this administration falters, I'm the first person who exposes that,
Yeah.
because that's what I'm known for. But I want to thank you
But,
for.
but we don't have a problem too. Once if we're in government, so we have to explain our policies, and we are not a society that has, we don't believe in censorship. We're not a party that believes in that. People must be free to explore or criticize their government. But there are boundaries that we should not cross. People's religion, are trying to create the religious disharmony or racial disharmony, or people gender with their gender. That these are boundaries we should avoid. The media and everyone else, because this country belongs to everybody, and we're doing it ourselves immeasurable damage when we feed on ourselves rather than present a united front in what could become a very exciting period for our country moving forward. We're looking in the next 10 years to move gross domestic per capita GDP to 25,000-30,000 US dollars from $5,000-6,000. That is like taking you to a global middle income level. It would create tons of opportunities here. So the sense of us as a people, Guyanese, we need to build on that all the time. So, but if you criticize us, don't feel that people who criticize us, we think that they're bad people, etc. But it must be sensible criticism.
Dr. Jagdeo, I want to thank you for that closing on that note, a positive, cohesive note, with suggestion of a bright future for all Guyanese. And thank you, the viewers, for tuning in to this interview, and I hope it has been informative, as most of our interviews are normally. Thanks again.